last week we dwelt in the third letter to the churches, meaning the qualities of God in Christ. And the letter was to the angel of that church in the city of Pergamos, and this was to the angel which is Christ within you. And we learned during this letter that Jesus was never crucified. That all self being spirit, individual self is spirit, and all that can be crucified is the image in mind, called physical form, which, when spirit is realized, becomes a spiritual, divine image, and there's no body there to be crucified, to be sick, to be buried. And this was basically the essence of the letter to the church at Pergamos. Now, it was necessary for us to reach that point where we can understand that the Spirit of God cannot be crucified, and that the Spirit of God is all there is. It was necessary in order to reach into a new level of ourselves, leading to the fourth dimension of consciousness, a level that is only attainable when you have overcome the material consciousness of this world. And now in the fourth letter to the churches, there is a letter to the angel of the church of Thyatira. Now this is a message about love, but you'd never recognize it, because it's also about a woman named Jezebel, who represents self-love. And although it's very easy to do an inspiring talk about love, and how beautiful love is, and how divine love sustains the universe, most of us have heard inspiring talks about love. And they're only one side of the coin. We find something new must be added to our understanding of divine love. Something must be cut away. Something must die in us for the true higher understanding of divine love to come into our experience. And that is the purpose now of this letter to the churches. It begins, "And unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These things saith the Son of God, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass." Now the eyes like unto a flame of fire. This is the way of speaking of omniscience, having all wisdom. And the feet of burning brass. Again, feet often refers to wisdom, in the sense that which you know you walk upon. And so this wisdom is of enduring qualities of brass. In other words, he who is speaking to us is he who is omniscient with that wisdom which is enduring. You are one with source when you hear the words of the Spirit through John. And he is addressing the Christ within you, the Father within, who is the Son of the Father infinite. He is addressing that quality of love of the Father which is omnipresent to your being. He is talking directly to the quality of divine love in you, to make your outer consciousness aware of this inner divine love that is there awaiting your recognition. I know thy works, and charity, and service, and faith, and thy patience, and thy works, and the last to be more than the first. He is telling you and me that the quality of love in us is infinite, and therefore we are in a progressive state now, rising from one level of releasing love to a higher level in which the quality of the last will be greater than the first. We are imperfect now in our understanding of the infinite love within us. But as we proceed, as we open, as we expand, as we release concepts, that love within us will expand within us, flowing forth, and we will be able to experience more divine love than we have in the past as we do certain things. Paul has told us that love is the fulfilling of the law. And there are certain aspects of that we should consider. Why is love the fulfilling of the law? Because when you have released all that is a barrier to love, then that love flows infinitely, fulfilling the law of the Father in you. In other words, love flowing infinitely through you is a sign that you have attained the realization of one infinite consciousness. And when you have attained that realization, then one infinite consciousness fulfilling itself fulfills all divine law. So you see, it isn't that you become more loving to fulfill the law. It's that because you are fulfilling the law, you become more loving. The love is the sign that you are fulfilling the law. For as you fulfill divine law, love flows to tell you that you are in the one consciousness now. And when that is happening, when you are in the one consciousness, and love is fulfilling the law, then all that the Father hath is made manifest as your experience, progressively, continuously, and without interruption. It is to this infinite, divine power of love in you that infinite Christ speaks to Christ within you, saying, "Awake, thou that sleepest." Christ will give thee light. The light of love will flow. And in that love flowing, there is no power between heaven and earth that can stand in the way of that perfect love. Now, of course, this would not be given to us if it were not a possibility. And so each of us is awakened to the fact that divine, infinite love is already established as the basis of our being. It is not external to us. It is not waiting in the future. It is present. It is here. It is now. It is within your consciousness. And when you have learned how to acknowledge its presence, it will manifest in your visible experience. So this purpose now is to release that invisible, infinite love into visible manifestation, freeing you from the bondage of all that is contrary to that perfect love. Up to now, you have experienced love, but only in a measure. Your last works will be greater than your first, for you are mounting up the scale of love, learning to cut away those qualities in you which have been the barrier to the full realization of being. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, and that notwithstanding refers to, notwithstanding the fact that up to now you have shown some charity, some patience, some service, some of the faith, I still have somewhat against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. Now Jezebel represents a quality common to every person on the earth. Historically, she married a king. He was the king of Israel in those days, named Ahab. And the symbology there is that the king of Israel had divided his kingdom. He had married outside of Israel. He was in a divided consciousness, Israel standing for divine wisdom. And now the king had married a foreigner, the daughter of Ethbaal of Tyre. And Jezebel was a religious fanatic. So much so that murder was one of her great long suits. She murdered anyone who opposed her, if he was a priest of God or not. And now Israel, or divine wisdom, man's quest for the realization of oneness, was challenged by this religious fanatic who called herself a prophetess. And she was opposed by only one man. That one man knew that Jezebel had no knowledge of the one God. As a matter of fact, Elijah, who opposed her single-handedly and defeated her, his own name means, my God is I am. That's the meaning of Elijah. My God is I am. And so in the symbology you find I am, the one infinite self represented by Elijah, who worships within, in the temple of the inner spirit, opposing Jezebel, who is teaching the children of Israel to worship in the external, to worship idols, to worship golden calves. And this was then outer worship and inner worship. brought face to face. Material consciousness and spiritual consciousness. And now the Spirit is saying to Christ within you, you have tolerated this woman Jezebel in your midst. This self-love, which is opposed to divine love. And the target is set as divine love cannot be released into the fullness of being where you stand until you have outgrown Jezebel, self-love. And that's why we're not speaking today inspirationally about love, because the real inspiration will come when we learn how to overcome self-love. Then we will experience that resident infinite love of our being, and we will not be led as Jezebel was by her own self-love. Briefly, she started off murdering priests. Then she had her husband, the king of Israel, hit upon a very interesting little scheme. Already, the knowledge of one God had disintegrated among men, and when he came into the throne, they had already built a few other altars around the country, and the very essence of oneness was symbolized by the Hebrew ark. The ark was placed in Jerusalem. There you worshipped, and nowhere else. There you worshipped that ark. And they all made pilgrimages to Jerusalem at least once a year to be in the presence of the ark. And this symbolized worshipping in oneness. Very few really knew what they were doing, but that was the purpose that was given to Moses, to unify all Hebrew religion into the knowledge of one God. That then deteriorated because men didn't know what one God meant. To them it meant the opposite of many gods. They did not know that one God meant one being, which embraces all and is the only being on the earth. Yes, Moses knew, Jesus knew, John knew, but now King Ahab knew nothing of this whatsoever. And so what's the difference if we worship that ark in Jerusalem, or we have a few idols around here, just so long as people worship something? And now the idea of Christ within is completely unknown. And people are said to worship Baal. Baal was the god that Jezebel brought. And whenever we worship, not within, not of the Spirit, but something outside of ourselves, we are worshiping Baal. Baal is a symbol of external worship. And of course, prayers to Baal, prayers to these idols were meaningless. Sacrifices to these idols were meaningless. No prayers could be answered by the idol. All external prayer was revealed as a nothingness, without divine substance. But this was what was happening to the great message of one. And Elijah could not stand still. Now you see, Elijah in you must come where self-love is. Elijah, who could stand and come to the king and say very briefly to him, I see we're going to have a rain. And the king would say, a rain? Well, we've had a famine in this country for 3 years. I've been waiting for you to come and bring the rain. Where is it? And Elijah would send a servant to Mount Carmel and tell him to look out. The servant looked out. No rain. He'd come back and report nothing. 7 times he was sent back. 7 times. Just like the 7 letters, the 7 degrees, the 7 steps of initiation leading to Christ consciousness. And on the 7th time, he saw a little cloud. That's all, just a little cloud, far off. And he reported that to Elijah, and Elijah said to the king, better get a new chariot and drive away before the rain prevents you from driving. In Christ consciousness, he did not have to depend upon the external evidence. What he saw with his eyes did not determine the truth of being. What he knew in his consciousness was the truth. It wasn't long before the rains came, before the famine was over. Christ consciousness alone could accomplish what nothing else could. Christ consciousness could manifest as the harmony of being, a need fulfilled. Not the worship of the idols of Baal, not external worship. And then there was another scene where all of the priests of Baal, in this case 450 of them, were challenged by Elijah. The challenge in those days was who could bring fire out of the sky to the altar. He personally was going to see that Jezebel's way of worship was banished from Israel. And so they went about their frenzied and frantic way of bringing fire from the sky to the altar. They whipped themselves, they rolled in the aisles, they prayed, they chanted, they did everything they knew, but no fire. And Elijah simply said, is your God sleeping? Where is this fellow Baal? What's he doing? Doesn't he hear you praying to him? And then Elijah very simply went inside to his own inner self, praying for nothing, recognizing that every need in the Father is fulfilled, now, finished, waiting to appear visibly through the witness of a consciousness that knows. And lo and behold, there was fire on the altar. And this was the symbol of the Christ within overcoming the impossible odds of the 450 who opposed Elijah. And so now Jezebel had to go to more stringent methods. She had to murder a few more people because her 450 priests lost their lives after having lost this wager with Elijah. So she determined Elijah was on her list. She'd have to get rid of him. Again, there's your symbology. The self-love in us, when it sees the handwriting of the Christ, it begins to more belligerently oppose that Christ. So she had on all kinds of methods. But it wasn't enough for her to introduce idolatry and worship of false gods. She was a demagogue at heart. And so once she discovered that there was a landowner who would not sell his land to her husband who wanted it. The husband wouldn't do anything about it, but she would. On some trumped-up charges, she got rid of him. Murder. And now we find that her false worship overlapped into other ways of life that were false. She used the government for personal gain. She introduced new ways of corruption. Always within us, self-love looks for self-gain. Self-love does not love our neighbor. Self-love plans. Self-love desires. Self-love seeks. And we must then learn that the Jezebel, the self-love, representing our lower self, is the fanatic within each material consciousness that is ever at war with Elijah, the Christ, the will of the Father. Jezebel ultimately died in a very strange way. It is said that the dogs ate her carcass. All that was left was skull, palms, and I think her feet. Nothing, you see. And this is the symbology that we are to come to that place where all that is signified by Jezebel in this world, in us, is routed out of our consciousness. Now you may say, I'm not a religious fanatic. I'm not corrupt. I'm not in favor of the government threatening people and coming down and restricting human rights. But there is in each of us an age-old bondage to the past. Something that will not let us move out of old habits. Even though we see the benefits of the new, we will cling to yesterday. And what this is trying to make us do is to see the need for a total shake-up, a major change, and establishing a new set of motives, a whole new way of life, a complete break with yesterday, so that all bondage to the past habits of the world consciousness that are clinging to us, trying to expel the higher impulses, are carefully found, discovered, probed within us until, by clearing out, by purifying, by reaching the point where I am not in a state of self-love, but in a state of glorifying the love of the Father, I can be that place where the light of the Christ shines through. As long as there is self-love, there is a second self. I die daily, says Paul, to self-love. I am reborn of the Spirit, says Jesus, reborn from self-love to that which is Christ-love. Now, how can you avoid self-love if you still have a self? The very natural instinct of each of us is to preserve this self, to hold on to it, to improve it. And we must learn that divine love cannot flow in a human selfhood. There is no place in a human selfhood that will permit divine love to flow. Jesus realized that only the Spirit of God is a channel for divine love. And all through the Bible you will hear, walk in love. Love one another as I have loved thee. Whoever loves this world is not loved by the Father. What are they telling us? They're telling us one of the greatest revelations we will ever hear, and one which we've never had to face, that we must do as Jesus did. not only to be reborn of the Spirit, but to realize that we never were born into form. Deep back in your past is a birth of a form. And as long as that birth of a form remains in your consciousness, that which was born you will love. You will protect it. You will strive to preserve it, to improve it, to build it, to glorify it. And out of that hypnosis, we must move as quickly as we become aware that to follow the Christ is not to glorify the human selfhood. We all have sought and yearned for divine love. We have not found it because that human selfhood, which we think was born one day, is the barrier. You take a little infant, yourself, when you first appeared. What is that child? Something has happened to make it conscious. And slowly, its way of consciousness becomes what it touches, what it hears, what it smells, what it sees. Just little pinpoints of consciousness expanding. Where is this coming from? We have discovered it is not coming from God. The parent of that child is not God. The parent of a mongoloid is not God. The parent of a blue baby is not God. The parent of a stillborn child is not God. The parent of human flesh is not God. Woman, says Jesus, what have I to do with thee? My name isn't human flesh. My name is light, the light of Christ. Jesus is telling his mother and us that she did not give birth to Jesus. Mary did not give birth to Jesus. Call no man your father upon this earth, for one is your Father. Spirit is not born through a human womb. You were not born through a human womb. Spirit is spirit and never changes. I die daily, says Paul, to the belief that I came through the process of human birth. Something else happened. It wasn't what the world believes. And it is that false belief that I came through human birth that creates the entity that must love itself and steps away from divine love, steps into self-love, and invites Jezebel to take over. Now, as this little infant you were became more conscious through the senses, day by day, you developed an image of yourself, which you call your body. and you had a mind, and as these both developed, this became a you. And you were taught to learn things, to improve yourself, to study hard, to make something of yourself, to become somebody. You were prepared to go out and be married, to raise families, all completely unaware of your spiritual being, which was never born and will never die. And this spiritual being that was never born and will never die, this Christ, this eternal self, has ever been yourself, and is yourself now, and is in the love of God. For the Christ, and only the Christ, has received the love of the Father. Christ is the child of love. When Mary was lifted to realize that the Spirit of God indwelled her and would now come forth to appear as a form, she was setting the pattern for the children of tomorrow, for the parents of tomorrow, for the new consciousness on the earth which can know that only one self is expressing, there are no others. There is no woman in the world who will ever give birth to a new life, a second life. For one life is the only life, and it has been established long before we appeared in form. That life was the life that the world called Jesus. That life is the life that the world calls you. That life is never born. And your awareness of yourself as that life and the qualities of that life will ultimately bring you out of that false sense of personal love, of personal need for protecting something that isn't there. And we will develop a completely new concept of body. Not of a physical body, but of that spiritual body which Paul tells us was not made with hands. No matter how hard you try, there is this human self of you which demands certain attention. It is expressing itself. It moves out into the world. It does. It says. It sees. It requires. And that self can never become spirit. That self is the imitation of yourself. That self is the barrier to divine love. You cannot bring divine love into that self. You must step out of that self into self to discover that divine love is already present, awaiting your dying daily to that false self. You could not crucify Jesus because he had never been born. He was in the consciousness of the eternal life. We are that same self who have never been born. And only through dying daily to that self and all that it represents do you discover the great secret that life begins when a corn of wheat is planted in the ground. When that corn of wheat is planted in the ground, it opens up, and something is born that couldn't be born any other way. The death of the corn of wheat is the birth of that which comes from that death. When we are told that the dead will rise from their graves, we are being told that we have the opportunity to open ourselves to love when we remove the barrier of a me that has no real existence. You cannot live spiritually in the flesh. The flesh profiteth nothing. The flesh is like grass. He who lives by the flesh shall die by the flesh. He who lives by the flesh shall find corruption. These are not the things we want to hear. But Spirit is not concerned with what we want to hear. Spirit is concerned with freedom in spirit. And deeper within us, these are the things we know we must hear. For always the flesh has rules of its own that it clings to. It is interested in God's glory after its own glory. Me first, and then maybe God. But the Spirit says we will not have a divided consciousness. You cannot glorify the Father and glorify a human self too. And so you see, we're not in a level of the message that permits us to veil the truth from ourselves or from others, or to make pretenses to ourselves. We must face the fact that dying daily means coming to that ultimate place in consciousness where I have found my pre-existent self to be my present self, and have removed the illusion that the birth of a body image was the beginning of me. Now, if you don't do that, here's what happens. Just for a moment, imagine that over here is your human birth, and over here on the other side is your human death, and in between is your present form, your body. From human birth, you have come to this place called body. And this body that you walk in now represents your concept, your complete consciousness from human birth up to this moment is represented by your body, for it is the outpicturing of your consciousness. And from this point, you will move out to human death. And that journey from here, from this body to human death, will be the balance of your journey from human birth to human death. This body in the middle now is all you've got to show for it, because this is what we have considered to be us. Now along comes a man like Joel and says, take that human birth over there and see it as the beginning of a parenthesis and dissolve it in your mind. Now take that human death over there and dissolve it in your mind. What have you got? There's no human birth, there's no human death. There's just continuous divine life. Now what's going to happen out here to this form? It's going to lose the consciousness of having been squeezed in between the cradle and the grave. It isn't just moving in this span at all. That was the illusion. Once birth is out of the way, death is out of the way. Nothing can die that wasn't born. Now, instead of being fed from a lifespan into a body, we are fed from an infinite span. The infinite is feeding this form instead of this little lifespan. That's why we learn to get out of the belief in birth, out of the belief in death. I don't have this little span that I must glorify, but rather the eternal self can now flow freely once you have removed these barriers of concept, of a beginning and of an ending. Because Spirit says, I am the beginning and the end. Not you. You didn't begin and end. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the all. Relax. Relax. The kingdom of God within you didn't begin with the cradle, and it won't end with the grave. Get rid of that old concept. Get rid of Jezebel. That's what self-love is all about. Filling this little span. And the span is illusion. You have no span. You are life itself. Life being itself. And now the consciousness, which had glorified this span of life and sought to protect it and improve it, discovers it has no span of life at all to protect. You are dividing the garment of the Father into the belief that God's life had a little lifespan called you. And it doesn't. There is no lifespan at all. And now in your fidelity to truth, not in the glorification of personal self, everything must go that tries to support the idea of a lifespan between the cradle and the grave. Woman, what have I to do with thee? My life isn't between the cradle and the grave. I am the light. I am the child of God. Call no man upon the earth your father. You were immaculately conceived of the Spirit. And it is this knowledge that must come into play in your consciousness. Whereas the world has wondered, did Jesus have a human father or not? Was it possible for a man to have a human mother and a divine father? The truth is that he didn't have a human mother either. And there was no Jesus either. There was the living Spirit of God that men called Jesus. But it knew itself to be what you and I must learn that we are. That Spirit of God, which is conceived only by the Father and then appears as an image through the Mother. Yes, the image is there, but it is only an image appearing through another image. And those images are important. They are the visible evidence of your invisible spiritual identity. Wherever there is a visible image called a form, you are looking at the visible evidence of an invisible spiritual identity. And that invisible spiritual identity is your neighbor. The recognition of it is your love. And if you want divine love to bring its miracle into your experience, then you cannot set up barriers and divide one neighbor from another, because until the one infinite Spirit is all that you accept as the reality of life, divine love will not flow through that infinite Spirit into your experience. So we're coming to a place where we have to learn to set up habits. Habits that will establish the consciousness of divine life as your life, and divine life as the life of everyone you know. These habits must be established, because otherwise world thought will erase even your greatest intentions. Now, let's take a mother who's worried about her daughter. Strangely enough, the mother's idea is that she, being a mother, must watch out for her daughter. She must see that her daughter doesn't do this or that. And usually there's more of a sort of a general telling the shaved tail what the shaved tail ought to do. It's as if the daughter has to live her life in accordance with what the mother feels the daughter should do. And so all kinds of psychological padlocks are established. You must not do this, you must not do that, you must not do the other. On Friday and Saturday this can be done, but on Thursday and Wednesday, no. And as far as my life, well, it may not be the best, but don't go by what I did. I've learned through experience, and I am telling you what to do. Now then, in this kind of a picture, we have the old-fashioned way in which a parent takes care of a child. We have the mother idea, that I am here to direct this child, to teach her. And if I don't teach her, how will she know? Now that used to be, and probably is, what the world thinks a mother is for, but it isn't. The purpose of the mother is to open that child to the realization of divine life. And what the mother has been doing by all of her maternal materialistic guidance is telling the child to obey something external to herself. She's turning the child away from the inner spirit. Obey mother. Not obey the inner impulse. Not become aware that you are a spiritual being, but live by the rules that mother sets down. Now this was wonderful, and would be more wonderful if it worked. But strangely, it doesn't work. Because until a child finds her name to be the living Spirit of God, all kinds of physical obedience add up to absolutely nothing in the eyes of divine love. Divine love still will not function in that person because they have not come into spiritual identity. And so you find that Jezebel has many strange ways of appearing in our personalities. Always, when we are maintaining the old habits, thinking that we're doing good, there is a self-love in us which says, I'm doing good for this child, and we are really dedicated to the task, but always we are turning a deaf ear to Elijah. We're turning a deaf ear to the will of the Father in us. We're glorifying not the Father, but our concept about the Father. And it all stems from a lack of knowledge that divine life is the only life that can ever exist. Now, if you knew that your daughter were divine life, if this were certainty, my daughter is divine life, could you possibly now be worried about divine life? Do you not see then that worrying about her is the Jezebel saying, this is not divine life? the divided consciousness, which thinks it loves God, but doesn't love God enough to accept the allness of God. Would you be worrying about whether that child will marry right or wrong, or should be out at 11 or 12 or 1 or 2? Would you not know that divine life can run its own life harmoniously and perfectly? Isn't the recognition of that divine life the law of immunity, accepted, realized, and experienced? Who has loved us that way? Who has loved us as divine life? Whom have we loved as divine life? And is there any other life? And so you see, generation after generation after generation, embedded in us, planted so deeply that it would take centuries to even uncover where it began. We have all seen separate selves out here. We have never seen one life. And as long as you are seeing separate selves, you are still in a sense of personal self. Now, there may not be more than 5 in the classroom who are ready to see oneself everywhere, divine self. But I can assure you, those 5 will find divine love living their lives. Wherever you have not divided his garment, wherever you have conquered the belief that you are a separate self apart from someone else, wherever you can look out and get rid of I, me, thou, him, and her, and know that all that is there, where the images appear, is one divine self, then something happens to you that is the ultimate destiny of everyone on this earth. You have sought your center. You say to yourself, let me find my center. Where is that center? What is that center? When you find your real center, it will be closer to this. You will look out at your daughter, and you will say, there goes divine life. The one invisible self is there. And there goes my son, and he is divine life, the one invisible self. And here am I, and I am divine life, the one invisible self. Well, there are 3 forms, but there's only one divine self. And behind these 3 forms are that one divine self that I am, she is, and he is. Now let's get rid of I, me, he, and she, and just live in the knowledge that there is one divine self. As I rest in that, the law of that one divine self is functioning in my being. It is the law of love. It is fulfilling the law. It is maintaining its perfect divine selfhood in spite of what you may see in the way of physical images. When something in you says that is true, you will rest in that knowledge that there is one divine self over this entire earth. I am that one divine self. And when I find the one divine self in me, that is the center, but not of my body. It is the center of the infinite self. My divine self in me is the center of the infinite. The entire infinite universe functions through the center of myself. I am the center of my universe. And you cannot be the center of your universe when you are a personal self, apart from the one divine self all around you. And so you limit yourself to this birth span from beginning to end, because I am a personal me. And the glory and grace of the infinite never touches us when we are so limited in our consciousness. Now then, there is one infinite self, and there is no one to be excluded from that. Every image is a challenge and a test. Do you accept the image or the one infinite self that is there? What does your consciousness accept? God or mammon? Invisible spirit or physical appearance? You see, this must be lived with until you have caught that all that can be there is God. Your daughter was God all the time. Your son was God all the time. And you were worrying about God coming home early or late, God getting married correctly or not. You were accepting that there was a birth. The Hebrews didn't understand one God either. They thought it was one God up there and all of us Hebrews down here. But it wasn't. Each Hebrew was a physical image of an invisible divine life that could never be separated from itself. There was one divine life, and that one divine life was the one God. And every physical form was merely the evidence of mental concepts that had been entertained about that invisible. Concepts that had entertained themselves into a form, an outer appearance, a concept that had no relationship to the reality. The form that is born becomes the form that ultimately dies, and you find then that it was never of the Father. It was a changing image. We have the story so far of self-love, which wants divine love. And so that you may be sure, self-love can never receive divine love. Listen to this. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. Talking about self-love. Whoever then is involved with self-love will find great tribulation. And I will kill her children with death. You see, Jezebel is only the symbol of self-love. I will kill her children with death. What are the children of self-love? Everything that we do humanly is a child of self-love. I will kill her children with death. And all the churches shall know that I am he which searcheth the reins and hearts. And I will give unto every one of you according to your works. I am he which searcheth the reins and hearts. The Christ within can't be fooled. You're in Christ within, or you're in self-love. You're in Christ, or you're in personal me. Who decides your experience? You do. Your consciousness makes its decisions. It keeps you in a sense of personal me, or it releases you to Christ. And that is the meaning of, I will give unto every one of you according to your works. Your consciousness will decide what you receive. In personal self, all of your children All the children of self-love, all the children of personal selfhood are condemned to death. Can anything be more explicit? And looking around you, isn't it true that whoever is in a personal self is condemned to death? Do you know any personal self that isn't going to die? Do you see any personal deeds that anyone takes with them? And so we are being lifted into the awareness that humanhood and Jezebel are one and the same. Humanhood is personal self. And as long as you have a personal self, it is going to die. And the deeds of personal self are condemned to death. We're in the Word of the Father, telling us nothing shall stand in this universe but my Spirit, because nothing else is in this universe. An image cannot be sustained by the divine. Only the divine image, only the light of your being is sustained by the Father. Now then, a conviction should have been reached in us that quality in me, that core of humanhood, which has been the focus of a certain part of my life up to a point, which refuses to die, must be reborn into a new awareness. There must be a regeneration. And as that core of humanhood is dissolved, you will discover a new life coming forth, the regenerated life, the real life issuing forth that which is called the infinite self, the Word made flesh, as your very being. And that self, the children of that self, are not committed to death. The deeds of that self are prospered. The deeds of that self are ordained. The Spirit goes before the children, the deeds, the acts of that self, and prepares the way. Only for that Spirit self does the power of Spirit function. And if we be a handful of disciples, fine. If we be but one, fine. But we will only be that one if we live in the awareness that all in me that is not divine must be cut away. I must see through it into the light of being. All that in my past was accepted, which was not divine, must be seen as that which never was. There can be no past to humanhood if only Spirit exists. There can be no future to humanhood if only Spirit exists, and there can be no present. Spirit has no past, no present, no future in this world. But it is omnipresent. Now we're going to have to find a way to live not in the false sense of self, that we may glorify the love of the Father in us. And so it says, but unto you I say, and unto the rest in Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine, and which have not known the depths of Satan, as they speak, I will put upon you none other burden. There is a place when, after having put forth the effort to tear down that which is not you, to come out of that which is not you, the tear down ends and the build-up begins. At a certain place I will put upon you no other burden, because you are now putting forth the dedicated spiritual effort to be aware of spiritual self. The karmas only continue as long as we insist on the personal self. Then the extra burdens continue. But when you are striving to come out of the sense of a personal me into the acceptance of an infinite being as the only, as my being, as his being, as her being, then the burdens begin to stop. And you notice the tide is turning. But that which ye have already, hold fast till I come. Now that line may be rather insignificant at the moment. That which ye have already, hold fast till I come. But it can become one of the most significant things when suddenly, even though the fields are barren for you, even though as you look around and say, well, there's someone less deserving than I, but they have more, that isn't true. Always the inner spirit is complete, perfect, present. And if you let yourself fall into the mistake of believing the outer appearances of people who are less deserving than you but have more, or the barren fields, you are mistaken. So hold fast to the truth. Hold fast to your consciousness of truth, to that which ye have, until I come. And when I come, then you say, thank God I held fast. Because I come quickly and I come often. This I that comes lifting you suddenly into the fields of glory does so in a manner that no words can express. And repeatedly. And lifts you into mansions you never dreamed existed. If you hold fast. If you look at that which is barren, knowing it cannot be. For God is all and God is abundant. A barren appearance means nothing to me. A sick appearance means nothing to me. A dying appearance means nothing to me. Why? Because the one divine life is not sick, is not barren, is not dying. This is holding fast. Until I come, and that I is your spiritual consciousness realized, suddenly pouring forth the fullness of what you had accepted in the invisible, to be there. The holding fast, then, is asking you to be willing to walk on the water of invisible spirit. Be willing to see these stretches of nothing with the knowledge that they are filled invisibly with the fullness of the Father. Until I come. And then you'll see the Father who seeth in secret pours forth plenteously. And even that is just a beginning. Now we come to the important part here. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. To keep my works unto the end means to live not in self-love, in a personal sense of attainment, in a seeking or a striving for something from me, but to honor the Christ within, to keep my works, is to honor Christ within yourself. That's what Jesus taught. If you love me, follow me. He who loves the Father will love the Son. Who is the Son of the Father? The Christ within you. To keep my works means to love the Christ within you more than you love your personal sense of self. Only you know if you're doing that. But even though the world may not know if you're doing that or not, the Christ of you knows. And that is why it is said that Christ examines the heart. If you're not living in the Christ sense of self, then you're living in the personal sense of self. You're not keeping my works till the end. Fidelity to Christ within is part of the overcoming. Now let's devise a method here which will tell us if we're being faithful to the works of the Father, which means the activity of Christ within. This is something each of us must practice, either as you are going to hear it or as you understand it or in some way related to this. If you do not go through a day denying the omnipresence of God, you will discover the glory of God following you, pursuing you, living your life. If you can find a way not to deny the omnipresence of God. I may be understating it, but I may not. I'm bringing it to a place where you can see that living in God is not all as complicated as the many volumes in the library would indicate. That ability not to deny His presence everywhere is continuing in my works to the end. And so I have a little list here which you can use to see if you are being tricked into denying God's presence in a way that you didn't know you were being tricked. Now let's just start with simple things. Something that is not to do with your physical body, but somebody else's. Let's take a friend who is sick. Now you have a sick friend. Do you accept that? Now, why would you accept a sick friend except that you believe there is a self over there? There is a self over there called a friend. Now, do you see that there isn't a self over there called a friend at all? You have divided many selves again. You're not living in the consciousness of one divine self. And so, when you have a sick friend over there, you should now be alerted to the fact that you have come out of the consciousness of one divine self. The moment you accept a sick friend, you have a separate self which isn't divine. The divine self doesn't get sick. Who is that friend that you have called sick? Someone who is not the divine self. You know where that puts you? Right out of Eden. And so right there you have denied omnipresence. The minute there is anybody on the face of the earth that you call sick, you have found a place where God is not. You will pay the price. Divine love will not flow into you because your consciousness is not continuing in my works unto the end. Now then, you've got to go back into the realization that the only self there is the Father, the invisible divine Father, the one invisible life that is here and there. It isn't sick. All right, now you've got a sick image, but you don't have a sick self. You don't have sick life. You've got a sick appearance. Now let's recognize then that the one life of the Father is right there where the sick appearance is. Which is the reality? The invisible divine life or the sick appearance? You know it's the invisible divine life. Now you want to make that sick appearance a happy appearance. But if the one invisible divine life is there, and it is the only reality, what you're really trying to do is to change unreality from badness to goodness. And you're in the trap, aren't you? You're not accepting that only the one divine life is there. You've got two there. You've got the one divine life and the sick appearance. Which one is going to go out of your consciousness? Are you going to acknowledge me, the divine life, in all thy ways, with all thy heart, soul, and mind? How can you then acknowledge the appearance of something called sick? You're being disobedient to the fact that only the one divine life is there. Now learn something else. That one divine life that is there is also an invisible spiritual body there. That the one divine life is divinely manifest, invisibly, right there. The Word is made invisible flesh, right there. You are seeing your friend incorrectly. You are not seeing your friend's invisible spiritual body right there. You are in error. You are a false witness. You are looking through the eye of a human being. And the reason you are looking through the eye of a human being is because you have not accepted the same truth where you stand. You have not accepted that the place whereon thou standest is holy ground, because right where you are is divine life. And it is spiritually manifest, invisibly, as a perfect spiritual body. The divine life that you are has immaculately conceived itself right where you are as a perfect spiritual body. And you are not living in that body consciously. And so you look out through your image at another image. But now reverse that. Get back into the acceptance of what this letter to the church is all about. This letter is to the Christ of you. so that the false outer consciousness can awaken to your spiritual self, your spiritual body where you stand. And you must look at the world from that consciousness, accepting that everywhere the one invisible life is invisibly manifest, and maintaining that manifestation. The Word made flesh invisibly is infinite and perfect everywhere now. Everywhere in this universe, infinite spiritual body exists under spiritual law now. And the appearance of a sick friend is but a false concept entertained about that invisible perfect manifestation. You are to continue in the works of Spirit, and therefore you rest in the knowledge that here where I am is perfect spiritual body. There where the appearance of friend is perfect spiritual body. And it is being maintained by perfect spiritual law. I am overcoming. He that overcomes will I give power over nations, over the material beliefs of the world. This one happening to be sickness. I am overcoming the belief that sickness can exist where the one divine life alone is. Now, what more do you have to do about it? If somebody tells you the sun isn't in the sky, do you have to find it and put it back there? It is in the sky. If somebody tells you they're sick, do you have to go and find their divine life and put it back there? It is there. The fact that the sun is out of the sky is a lie, because it is in the sky. The fact that there is sickness is a lie, because the divine life is there alone, and it is not sick. You are accepting omnipresence. Your acceptance is all that is necessary. You're accepting the fact, knowing that the fact accepted in your consciousness will then become a visible fact. You are standing in the one consciousness. You're not being tempted to do something about a lie. You are maintaining the integrity of the one divine life. You are continuing in my works. You are overcoming the belief that there is something beside my one divine life. You are being an Israelite. You are not making the mistake of a one God in the heaven, but of a one divine being whom we all are. Jezebel is gone. There's no self to love other than the one divine self. There's no personal friend there. There's no personal me here to see a personal friend there. There is the one divine self being itself here and now. And the hypnotism of something other than that one self has been discovered, which enables you to stand ye still. And behold, the salvation of that one divine life will now express itself visibly through your enlightened consciousness. Here, it will appear there. You are accepting omnipresence. You are not denying the omnipresent one divine life. And anything that denies it, you know, is a lie, an unreality. Any form of sickness is a denial of the one omnipresent divine life. And if you love any other life more than the one omnipresent divine life, you are not getting the message of divine love. Love me. Love your Father. Love the Christ. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. You lay down every human concept, and you simply accept that divine life is there. There is no power on earth to push it away. No power on earth to make it undivine. No power on earth to make it anything except its own perfect self. Everywhere. And therefore, what is this? If it cannot push away the perfect divine self, what is it? Hypnosis. You are hypnotized. You are looking at what is not there. And you are looking at it because that of you which is not here is doing the looking. Find your divine center, be true to it, and you will find your divine center is the center of all that is divine in this universe. Each of us in the miracle of infinity is the divine center of infinity. You were never less. Now, whenever you find a sickness then, you have found a non-existence, and you are being untrue to the one divine life. And divine love will not flow into your experience under those conditions. Only when you overcome the belief that there is another place, another life, another self than the one divine life, will you be given the power over nations, the power over materiality. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken in shivers, even as I received of my Father. When you have accepted one divine life, then the power of that divine life by itself breaks all other powers, as the vessels of a potter thrown upon the ground. All powers in the world are shattered by the truth, which is the rod. The truth of spirit, the truth of the one divine life, maintained by you, shatters every false appearance of power. There is nothing can stand against your knowledge of one perfect divine life here, there, everywhere. Nothing can stand against it. For as I have received of my Father, I am that one divine life, that Christ within you. As I have received of my Father, so you receive of me. When you have accepted one divine life to be your life, you have accepted Christ to be your name. And what Christ has received from the Father becomes your permanent dispensation. Now, this is the truth of our being now. We all know it. Our problem isn't to know it anymore, it's to practice it, isn't it? We all know that we are divine life. We know that our name is Christ. We know that the Spirit of God is our only name. It is the practicing of that truth that is going to make the difference in whether we overcome the belief in a second self. Now you say, I lack. I'm short this month. Do you see how ridiculous that is in truth? Because the you that is short is saying, I'm not divine life. And the moment you have accepted the shortness, the lack, you have accepted that I am not the divine life, and that is precisely why you're short. The belief that you could be other than the divine life is that which externalizes as that which is lack. So when you see lack in your life, don't be fooled. We've had too many years of that, being fooled by it. Now we can look at the lack and say, that's another appearance, like a sick friend. There's only one divine life. I have all the hidden manna there is. The only reason it hasn't shown is because I, in my foolishness, had thought that I was a human self, not a divine. And a human self is a finite, divided being, apart from the one infinite. I just told the infinite, go away, I don't want any part of you. I'm a human being. But I'm not. I am the one divine self, and the fullness of the Father flows through its own infinite selfhood. And therefore I look at the appearance of lack, but I will not deny omnipresence of the one divine life. And now you can see that you've been spending your days denying the omnipresence of the one divine life and wondering why divine love isn't expressing in your life. It's like putting up a sign on the door and saying, don't come in, and wondering why nobody comes in. But as you are divine life and accept it, you must learn to reject everything that denies that you are divine life. And then everything that denies you are divine life being rejected, you are continuing in my works. You are overcoming. You are being a faithful son. And the Father within, who examines the reins and the hearts, who knoweth in secret, rewards thee openly, because the one consciousness, accepted as yours by accepting one divine life, assures you of being under the government of God. Now, here's a little list. Lack, limitation, pain, disaster, change, seeking, asking, striving, praying, seeing individuals instead of the one, fear, criticism, planning, desire, seeing evil, hearing evil, speaking evil, resisting evil. Do you see how limitless the list is? And we do these things every day. We see evil, we hear evil, we speak evil, we resist evil. That's all a denial of the one divine life. So find your divine center. I am the one divine life. I am overcoming the belief that I am not the one divine life. That's my overcoming. Now, if I'm the one divine life, I cannot favor me over that fellow, because he's the one divine life. I'm letting the one divine life live itself. Let the Christ live itself. You see, now you've got to come into the trust of that one divine life. The acceptance of it is walking upon the Spirit, walking upon the living waters of confidence. I am the one divine life, and therefore my eternal self is already fulfilled. And I will give him the morning star. As you're willing to accept the one divine life and are faithful unto it, I will give thee the morning star. There is a light shining in the darkness. And if you're willing to accept divinity as the only self, that light will shine through the darkness. And it will be visible. That light will be the illuminating light of self coming through your consciousness. The morning star. The day star. The star that accompanies you throughout the day to give you that inner Christ vision of reality. That morning star is the illumination we have all been seeking. It can only come to one who is faithful to one divine life everywhere, who will see no other life accept no other appearance, knowing that the invisible self is right there and right here, and we are one, and I will be still in that. And in this realization, the morning star in you begins to rise. It rises into your consciousness to enlighten it, to shine in it, and then to shine through it and out of it and to bless the world. Christ born in you is the morning star. Let him who hath an ear hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. Always this hearing what the Spirit saith means keep listening within, because there's more to follow. You're never through. Greater things shall ye do. This morning star is just beginning to rise in consciousness, as we now walk forth in the realization that I and the Father are the same one divine life. Thou seest me, thou seest the divine life of the Father, invisible to your eyes, but nonetheless, nothing else is here. I see you, but I only see the appearance. All that is there is the one perfect divine life of the Father. Does it have a witness in your consciousness? If it does, you have found the morning star, and it will light your way. It will become a lamp unto your feet. Now we have our divine center, the realization that I am that divine life, which is the life of the Father. And I did not begin at birth, because the Father's life did not begin with my human birth. I had no beginning. I am that infinite divine life. And underline that word infinite in your consciousness, so you will never accept the appearance of finitude as a fact. There is nothing finite in the infinite. Now this is the change that is taking place in our consciousness. As human beings, we look at a world outside of ourselves, over which we have a sort of quasi-control up to a point. Ultimately, it controls us. It has dominion over our forms. It tells us when we're to die. It tells us when we're to be sick. That's our mortal self, the one we're learning we never were. There is also the reality of us, and it is not a human life looking out into the world. It is the infinite life looking into itself. Your within is your infinite self looking within itself. There is nothing outside of your infinite life. Everything in infinite life is within itself. And that is why you are told the kingdom of God is within you. You will learn that you can live in the infinite self, looking within, and your entire life will unfold within your infinite realization. You will not be looking from within to the without. You will not be looking at an external world outside of you. Everything that happens in infinity happens within infinity. And we are all that one infinite divine self. We will now see the world happen within that infinite self and under infinite law. To the degree that we are able to let ourselves make this change of consciousness from the finite, mortal, dying self to the infinite, divine, undying, eternal self. The one life that ever was and ever will be and never began and never will end. This is how you will come ultimately to that seventh step, which is the Christ consciousness, completely realized unto eternity. Now that's the fourth letter. I've been receiving reports from those who have received tapes saying something's happening in me I can't describe. And that's about the feeling I hope we're all in. Because as this happens, you can be sure that which you can't describe is spiritual activity. It is taking root. It is finding a home in your consciousness. And it will govern your life with spiritual truth, with one power, a power that knows no other power than the perfect divine love. It will do it all by itself through grace, if you will continue in my works until the end. Let's try a little silence now, and in your center, know that when you have found your spiritual self, it is the center of an infinite universe. And all of infinity is pouring always to that center and through it. Never are you limited to your own human abilities. Nothing is impossible. There is no limitation. There is no height. There is no ceiling. The infinite self will always express its own infinite self through your divine center. As you're living in the knowledge of one divine life, I am. My neighbor is. My friend is. All are. I am that divine center of infinity. And then let go and accept what infinity pours into your life. perfect time to say goodbye, I imagine. I'd like to read you one little phrase, may I? It's the second Psalm, and it says, "Ask of me, and I shall give the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession." The uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. That is speaking to the infinite Son. I shall give the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. And if you're willing to take less, you're not the infinite Son. But there is no other. To you, to the divinity in you, the Father says, "Ask of me, and I shall give the uttermost parts of the earth." You see, we can't reduce it down to less. We must think in terms of the infinite as our life, or lose the power of the infinite where you stand. Thank you again.